If y'all can hear Bella, I'm sorry. She's going to town on a bone. What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel. And not welcome back, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, because you will not be disappointed unless, of course, you know, it's a you thing, you got a problem, and your taste level is lacking and all of that, which has nothing to do with me. For everyone else, welcome. I hope you're doing well. You guys did not see me last week, and that was for a reason. Let me just explain something to y'all. I live under a rock, okay? I am a protector of my peace at all costs. So a lot of things happen in the world that I'm unaware of. Marcellus Williams' case is one of the things that I had no knowledge of. I saw it circulating last week for the first time, and the thing is, I've been black all my life, so not much really surprises me. I started looking into his case, and I literally could not stop reading about it. I got to the point where I was like, wow, this is a lot. And I figured several things. I feel like his story is very important to be told as many times as it can be told. And I also figured that there may be other people who had heard the name, seen his picture, and was not aware of the details. And so it went from me just trying to educate myself to me collecting notes so I can then educate y'all as well. So that's what we're talking about, and that took up my whole week. It's a lot to unpack. So Felicia Gayle comes from a large, tight-knit family, and after high school graduation in 1974, she attends the University of Illinois to pursue a degree in journalism. There she meets the man she would eventually marry, Daniel, who is becoming a doctor, and while the two of them don't have children of their own, their home is not without the presence of children. Felicia, who gets a job working as a reporter for a St. Louis newspaper, is also a tutor for underprivileged children, and she goes far beyond just being a tutor. She takes these kids on trips to places, exposing them to different things that they probably would not have. She also works to build relationships with their parents and their family, and she even has these children over to her house to like bake cookies and do fun little crafts and things like that. Very involved with the children. Making greeting cards is another something that she enjoys doing in her downtime, and it's something that those around her really enjoy and look forward to receiving. And Felicia spends hours making these cards. She puts a lot of thought into the wording, the art, and on August 11th of 1998, she has a stack of over 30 greeting cards ready to be mailed out to different family members, friends, for various occasions, but unfortunately she does not get the chance to send them out. That evening, Felicia's husband Daniel leaves work for the day and arrives at their home located in a gated suburb of St. Louis to find Felicia laying lifeless on the floor of the foyer in their home. Now immediately Daniel calls 911 and the police arrive to their house at about 7:50 p.m. At the scene, police find a bloody shoe print not belonging to Felicia nor her husband, and the crime scene itself kind of paints a picture of Felicia's final moments. Felicia had a routine of taking a shower, and there was this purple shirt that she will always put on after the shower. You know, sometimes the girls, we put on like a robe or something while we do our hair, our makeup, or just moisturize. So it appeared that Felicia had been upstairs showering at the time that somebody entered her home. And it is assumed that she had thrown it on, heard a noise coming from the first level of their home, and had gone down the stairs to check it out. But unfortunately, she had been met by her perpetrator at around the third step up. That is where the blood trail begins, and it leads to where she was found, which was on a rug nearby. She suffered between her neck and head a total of 43 wounds at the hands of her attacker, who had used a butcher knife from her own kitchen, and it had been left lodged and twisted into her neck. She had a lot of defensive wounds on her hands, on her arms, showing that she had attempted to block some of the blows and fight off whomever was attacking her. Now, she also has blood and skin underneath her fingernails from where she had scratched them as well. And I also managed to pull several strands of hair from the person, and she still had this hair clutched in her hands. Now, in addition to the DNA that she has collected from her killer and the shoe print, they had left behind a bloody fingerprint as well. Now, as gruesome as the crime scene is, this is not the first of its kind that the police have seen recently. Less than a month prior, on July 18th, just 3 miles away, Deborah McClain had been found inside of her apartment the exact same way. The cases of these two women mirror each other. Deborah had also been at home alone when her attacker came in. They had also used used a knife from her kitchen and had left it lodged and twisted into her neck as well. Now, the medical examiner involved in both women's cases points out the similarities between the two to detectives and makes it very known that they believe that this was the work of the same person, which you would think will go without saying. They still had not figured out who had done this to Deborah, so obviously the person responsible is still at large. The victims themselves were also very similar in superficial ways. Felicia's 42, Deborah is 40. They have similar body types, both have long brown hair, and as far as the wounds, they have about the same number and they're all in the same exact location. Both women's purses were stolen from their home, and additionally, a laptop has been stolen from Felicia's home that belongs to her husband. And John McClain, Deborah's husband, just as Daniel had with Felicia, he returned home to find this very grisly sight and had called the police. Instead of being found in the foyer near the front door, though, Deborah had been found inside of her kitchen. Now, a family member of Deborah's has alleged that a week later at Deborah's funeral, her husband John had told them that both he and the police were aware of who had done this to Deborah and said, quote, "You'll be surprised when you find out." But he doesn't say who the person is. He doesn't give any kind of clue as to who this person was. That's all he says. And why he would say this is beyond me, because police actually did not have a clue who had done this. A $10,000 reward is offered on behalf of both families for anybody who has any type of information related to the homicides, but no one comes forward. And 8 months later, when they still have no suspect, no leads, and haven't had any answers to give to either family, the investigating team begins to receive a lot of backlash for their lack of progress. So girls were calling them incompetent. Then what appeared to be out of nowhere, Captain Jeffrey Keller, the chief of the Bureau of Investigation at the time, comes forward and asserts that Felicia's murder was, quote, an isolated incident. Despite all of these similarities, he points out the differences between the two women. Felicia had a career as a journalist. She was the wife of a doctor. She lived in this nice neighborhood, gated community, whereas Deborah was an employee at Walgreens. She lived in an apartment, and although there was only 3 miles between their residences, her apartment was in a lower income area, as if any of this means that this could not be the work of the same person. It just seemed really odd, really strange that all of a sudden they want to separate these two women and say, well, no, on second thought, this was not the work of the same person. Now, it appeared that way on the surface, that it was just random. But in reality, behind the scenes, there was actually a reason that they were setting this up to separate the two women's cases, because a man named Henry Cole Jr. has come into play. Now, Henry is a career criminal. He is no stranger to the police force whatsoever, as this man has received over 12 convictions, ranging from first-degree robbery to unlawful possession of a concealed firearm. Child, the list go on. He a dirty little me, and was very recently incarcerated at City Jail in St. Louis. Now, during his stint in jail, he had met 29-year-old Marcellus Williams, who was in there for burglarizing, robbing a Burger King. Just 20 days after the murder of Felicia, Henry and Marcellus shared a cell, and in conversation, the two of them found out they were related, not by blood, but like by marriage. And in jail where you ain't got nobody, that's enough to feel like family. So they get along, there is no issue as far as Marcellus knows. And according to Henry, sometime in early to mid-May, he and Marcellus were watching the 6 o'clock news. It was a day like any other jail day, when a segment about Felicia Gayle's unsolved case airs. Now, it is important to mention that at the end of this segment, the $10,000 reward money is mentioned, and they urge anyone who has any information to come forward. Roughly 2 weeks after watching this segment, on June 4th, Henry Cole Jr. is released from jail. And that same day, he goes right into a police station and tells them that he knows exactly who is responsible for Felicia Gayle's murder. His old cellmate, Marcellus. He tells them about the night the segment aired roughly 2 weeks before, and that later on that same evening, Marcellus confided in him, confessing that he had been the perpetrator. According to him, Marcellus said that he had taken the bus midday to that neighborhood and had committed the crime. Now, Henry also lets them know that this information that he is coming forth with, it is not for free. It's not out of the goodness of his heart. He is interested in the reward money, and he wants to know how he can go about claiming that. And just like that, solely based off of Henry's tip, police began investigating Marcellus Williams. And I use the term investigating very loosely. They go to question an ex-girlfriend of his named Laura Asaro, who also has a criminal history of her own, including outstanding warrants for her arrest. So when they show up, y'all, she thinks this is it. She's about to be hauled off. She's also very familiar with the officers. She is no stranger to them. Many of her priors have come from sex work or drug-related charges. And she had actually been an informant of theirs in the past in order to help get out of some of her own stuff. She had even testified against Marcellus before in exchange for reduced charges related to her sex work. So on this day, she is relieved to find that they are not there to arrest her for her outstanding warrants, y'all. They are there to ask her more questions about Marcellus. And right away, they put the offer on the table to help her get her current warrants taken care of in exchange for any information that might be helpful in their investigation. Then there's also their reward money as well on the table. She wouldn't be getting the entire 10K because Henry is due a portion of it. So between the two of them, it will be split. So when they ask if Marcellus had ever confessed to her about committing this particular crime, she says yes. And in the final version of the statement that they take from her, she says that he had confessed to her, and on that evening she had seen some scratch marks on his neck. She had asked him about the scratch marks, and he told her that he had driven to Felicia's house midday, and then he threatened her life and the lives of her family members if she ever told anybody. So now we have one person saying he confessed to them and said he took a bus midday. Another person saying, oh yeah, he confessed. He said he drove over there midday. Mind you, he had an old Buick LeSabre that they have proof that was not even operable at the time of Felicia's murder, and surely would have stuck out in Felicia's neighborhood. The trunk didn't even close all the way, yet no one recalls seeing this car in the neighborhood or outside of Felicia's house in the middle of the day. Laura also tells them that Marcellus had also traded a laptop that he'd stolen with a man that lived down the street, Glenn Roberts, in exchange for drugs. Now when they go speak with Glenn, he remembers this exchange very vividly. But his recollection of what happened versus Laura's is not quite the same. He admits to receiving a laptop that he knew was likely stolen from Marcellus as collateral for money that he wanted to borrow, not drugs. And Glenn also tells them that Marcellus mentioned that this laptop he had gotten from his girlfriend Laura, that she had it, she wanted to get money for it instead, and he told her he knew exactly who to take it to get the money, and that he'd take it around there to Glenn himself. Glenn still has the laptop. When he hands it over, the serial number matches that of the one stolen from Felicia Gayle's house. Now Laura also tells police that she had seen Felicia's ID in the trunk of Marcellus's car. However, Felicia's ID was not missing. Her purse was, yes, but her ID was still inside her house. It wasn't in the purse. Even still, with these inconsistencies, they continue to set their sights on Marcellus. They go to search the inoperable Buick LeSabre that is still parked. And while they do not find Felicia's purse nor a duplicate ID in the trunk, they do find a ruler and a calculator inside of her glove box with the logo from the newspaper that she worked at that they, of course, believe to have been hers. Strangely, though, there are 0 fingerprints on the ruler or the calculator, like none whatsoever. They speak with several other people in the neighborhood who all say that this car has been sitting here inoperable and not working for quite some time now. And not only that, Laura has been living inside of the car, but they still decide to run with Laura's story that he had driven this car midday to Felicia's neighborhood and had confessed to her and his cellmate. And Laura Asaro agrees to testify against Marcellus, repeating all of these things on the stand in exchange for dismissal of outstanding warrants against her and a share in the reward money. According to the police at this point, Marcellus Williams, despite all of these inconsistencies, is now a viable suspect in the case of Felicia Gayle, but not in the case of Deborah McClain, because Marcellus was actually in jail during Deborah McClain's murder. So it would have been impossible for them to also pursue him as a suspect in that one. It was just no way they would be able to say he was responsible for both when he was in jail during one. As far as there being similarities between the two, them thinking that this was the same person, possibly a serial killer on the loose. None of that is still a working theory. The chief comes out and says, no, it's not the work of the same individual, just oddly similar and coincidental. Now, just days after speaking to Laura Asaro, Marcellus is charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. Now, mind you, all of this catches him by surprise because he's still in jail minding his jail business. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, he is fighting this new case. His lawyer does request testing of the bloody fingerprint that they had found at the scene of the crime so that they could be compared to his, because you would think that's like one of the fastest and most accurate way to like rule out or prove someone's guilt. But the prosecutors come back and say that is impossible because the police have now lost that piece of evidence. Now, prior to his trial date, his lawyer puts in another request for additional discovery and a continuance to allow time for forensic testing of the other pieces of DNA that they have, and all of his motions are denied. He also put in a continuance request because the month before he was given Marcellus's case, he was given a different capital murder case, and so he is trying to work two very big cases at the same time, and he did want to give each one enough attention to detail. However, the courts did not feel that that was reason enough for him to request a continuance. Now, in regard to his caseload, Marcellus's lawyer said that he did the best he could, but couldn't honestly say that he did his due diligence because his attention was so divided. He had asked for several continuances and all were denied. Marcellus's trial begins in June of 2001, and they are off to a terrible start. The process of the jury selection was crazy. The prosecution struck 6 of 7 qualified black candidates from the panel, and the 7th because they were a postal worker. The reason being, according to them, is that postal workers are typically disgruntled, lacking in ambition, therefore they don't make good jurors. That was the reason. And this sounds crazy to me, but this is actually a thing in Missouri and probably elsewhere. It even has a name. It's referred to as the postman gambit, and it's the process of automatically striking all postal workers during the jury selection process, and has been a long-standing practice in Missouri despite them being called out on it, despite them being accused of racial bias and simply just not wanting black jurors, because most of the postal workers in Missouri are African Americans. The official jury selected for Marcellus is 11 white jurors and 1 African American juror. So they started the trial under heavy criticism and with plenty accusations of racial bias. Now, during his trial, both incentivized witnesses, meaning they receiving something for their testimony. They're just not here because this is something they witnessed or heard or was told. It's in exchange for something. Both testify sticking to their original conflicting versions of events. And Henry Cole actually admits on the stand that his sole purpose for coming forward, and if he had not received his half, he wouldn't even come to court that day. Glenn Roberts also takes the stand and repeats what he had told police about how he had acquired the laptop, including the comment that Marcellus had made about getting it from his girlfriend. But get this, the trial judge decides that that part of his testimony would not be heard by the jury, and he rules that as hearsay. The trial judge says that if Marcellus wants the jury to know where the laptop came from, that he had gotten it from his girlfriend Laura, then he needs to take the stand and testify and say it. But Marcellus Williams had already decided that he was going to exercise his 5th Amendment and wasn't planning on taking the stand, which he has the right not to do. So with this omission of very important information, all the jury knows is that Marcellus had Felicia's laptop and that he pawned it. Now, in addition to the laptop, the state points to the ruler and the calculator being found inside of the glove compartment of his car, and the defense of course highlights the fact that there wasn't a single fingerprint on either item. But according to the prosecution, that is because Marcellus wiped them down. Now, Marcellus's lawyer fires back saying, or maybe they were planted there by either police themselves or their star witness who was actually living in the car at the time. And Laura was also still in possession of a laptop bag that looks exactly like the one that Felicia's laptop was inside. But bags don't have serial numbers, so there's no way to prove that this bag was Felicia's bag, and they turn a blind eye to that bag. Then they get to the topic of the forensic evidence. The shoe print found inside of Felicia's home, it did not match her shoe size, it did not match her husband's, and it does not match the size of Marcellus's shoe either. They also recovered pubic hair from the scene in addition to the hair she clutched inside of her hands. Neither samples of hair match Felicia, her husband, nor do they match Marcellus Williams. The blood and skin collected from underneath her fingernails, they don't belong to him either. Additionally, the handle of the weapon has foreign DNA on it also. Foreign DNA that matches members of the prosecution team. Now, they admit to handling it without gloves on, and they say that that's how their DNA got on it. But it just really speaks to how careless they were. After hearing all of the things, all of the DNA test results, the jury deliberates for 5.5 hours before they return a verdict: guilty. June 19th of 2001, during his sentencing, it takes the jurors all of 90 minutes, including their lunch break, to decide what his punishment would be, and they decide that this man deserved the death penalty. Now, of course, because this is some bull, he wastes no time filing an appeal, but the appellate court denies it and decides to uphold his conviction. In 2003, he files another motion for post-conviction relief, citing his attorney's inability to fully give his case the attention it needed, and says that the court should have tested Laura to see if her DNA matches this mystery person's DNA. And 2 years later, in 2005, the Missouri Supreme Court denies this motion as well, and again chooses to uphold his conviction. Now, the following year, his counsel decided to request that police conduct further DNA testing, comparing the DNA evidence not only to his ex-girlfriend Laura, but others as well that were inside of the DNA database, just to see if there was a match to anyone else that was already in the system. Request denied. Now, his lawyer pushes back against the denial, and it is escalated all the way up to the United States Supreme Court and is even denied there. And after that, Marcellus is given an execution date of January 28, 2015. Now, of course, he still is not giving up. He and his lawyer filed yet another motion to have the DNA that was found on the weapon compared to the DNA found at the McLean crime scene that is still unsolved. Now, this is a very reasonable request, right? Just compare the DNA found at one crime scene to the DNA found at another, just to rule out or confirm that this was the work of the same person. The Supreme Court at this point halts his execution and appoints a special master to review the DNA findings. Their finding is that there is not enough foreign DNA present on the handle of the knife to create an entire profile. They're able to say that definitively, without a doubt, none of the DNA found on the handle matches Marcellus Williams' DNA. And this is according to 3 different independent experts, one of which explained to CNN that while it's not enough DNA to convict someone, it is enough to rule someone out. And to put it in layman's terms, the example they used was like having 2 different social security numbers that you're trying to see if they're the exact same, but one of them has numbers that are smudged or missing. You can't definitively say, yes, these are the exact 2 numbers. But if one starts with a 2 and the other one starts with a 6, you can say, okay, yeah, no, these are not the exact same social security numbers. So these results, as well as the experts' findings, they're all handed over with hopes that Marcellus will get another court date. But instead, on January 31st of 2017, without warning, the Missouri Supreme Court denies him another court date without reason as to why, as if DNA evidence and experts excluding him as the perpetrator still was not enough to at least hear him and his lawyer out. And because his original execution date had passed, they then set a new one of August 22nd of 2017, just 6 months ahead. And every one of his subsequent appeals are denied. Like, what was the point of assigning a master to look into the things, girl, if you're gonna disregard what they had to say? With this new date just months away, he is continuing to fight for his freedom, and by now, even Felicia's family is advocating for him. They want the person who did this to pay, not just some random person that you can get away with pinning it on. And as far as Deborah McLean's family, it's like the police didn't even care to do the song and dance for her less affluent family. With very little time left, his lawyer makes a desperate attempt to petition the governor of Missouri at the time, Eric Greitens, to stop the execution and review evidence of innocence. Now, little history, a Missouri governor has ever only used their power to stop an execution 3 times in all of the history that they have had the ability to do so. But with the case so obviously botched and all of the DNA evidence pointing to innocence, it was worth a shot. Marcellus's new execution date comes, and with just 4 hours before he is due to be executed, Governor Eric Greitens agrees to postpone it and have a board of 5 former judges to review the things again. He specifically instructs that the board investigate the claims regarding the DNA. He also issues this statement: "It is the ultimate permanent punishment to carry out the death penalty. The people of Missouri must have confidence in the judgment of guilt, and in light of new information, I am appointing a board of inquiry in this case." And the board has a few options here. So they can fully exonerate him, they can overturn his conviction and retry him, having all of the things fairly considered during this second trial. They could commute his sentence to life in prison without the possibility of parole, or they can uphold his conviction and he'll get what will now be his 3rd execution date. The board begins its investigation, and Marcellus and his lawyer are fully cooperative and responsive when they're asked for additional statements, additional paperwork, and just answers to questions. And then on May 29th of 2018, about 9 months later and into their investigation, Governor Eric Greitens resigns after a scandal regarding his misuse of campaign funds and sexual misconduct. He is very quickly replaced with this guy, Michael L. Parsons, and the board continues its investigation with them requesting additional information from Marcellus's legal team well into 2020. And this entire time the board has been investigating, which is now over 3 years, the prosecutors, they have been completely unresponsive. They have not been answering questions. They have not been turning over the requested paperwork to the board. They just haven't been responsive at all. Between 2020 and 2023, no more additional information is requested from Marcellus's team. They don't hear anything from the board, and his lawyer is feeling and hoping at least that no news is good news. So they're just patiently awaiting their findings. He has now been incarcerated behind this particular case for 23 years. Now, during this time in prison, he did become a devout Muslim and acted as a spiritual advisor for the other inmates. So he was making good use of his time, at least the best he could, I guess. And with COVID going on, it's understandable that there would be some delays and possibly more pressing matters. So he was trying to be patient. But then June 28th of 2023, Governor Michael Parsons issues an executive order to dissolve the board immediately without reason and without them concluding their inquiry so that they could make an informed decision. He also lifts Marcellus's stay of execution, with his reason being that the board had been at it for nearly 6 years now without coming to a conclusion, and he did not want them to go on an additional 6 years investigating, delaying justice, leaving the victim's family in limbo. Child, a victim family is trying to put a stop to this. Like, you're speaking about a family who is also advocating for this man's freedom, or at least for him to have a fair trial. They have been very vocal that they did not feel that this was going to bring them justice, and them recognizing that this was not about what was in their best interest or what they really needed at all, but more so about the police wanting to look like they solved the case and not wanting to admit that they were wrong. The governor also said that this process solves nothing and we should instead rely on the due process of the law, which had been completed during the trial and sentencing. The very next day after his executive order, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey asked the Supreme Court to issue a new execution date for Marcellus. Now, August 24th last year of 2023, Marcellus and his legal team, along with the Innocence Project, they filed a civil lawsuit against the governor, claiming he violated Marcellus's due process rights by abruptly dissolving this board. And as a last-ditch effort to try to at least save this man's life, his attorney works along with some members of the original prosecution team to try to reach a deal. that would stop him from being. The deal was that Marcellus will offer an Alford plea. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what that is, an Alford plea is when you still maintain your innocence, but you acknowledge that the state has enough evidence to paint a guilty picture of you. It's like, I know what it looks like. I didn't do it, but I know they have enough evidence to make it look like I did. In his case, they don't. But at least with the Alford plea will come a lesser sentence, which would be most likely life in prison without the possibility of parole. The state Supreme Court blocks this deal at the request of none other than Missouri's Attorney General, Andrew Bailey. The Andrew Bailey who could not wait to get this man another execution date. So the decision is made to uphold his original conviction by a state judge, claiming that the evidence may not have proved guilt, but was not enough to establish innocence either. He was literally ruled out by DNA evidence. The Missouri Supreme Court then affirms this decision. And on June 4th of 2024, Marcellus Williams is given his third execution date of September 24, 2024, just over 3 months ahead. The Missouri Supreme Court, they ruled to move forward with this date despite his pending lawsuit, and Governor Michael Parsons, of course, turns down Marcellus's request for clemency. So on this past Tuesday, September 24th, 2024, despite the very obvious misjustice and pleas from the public along with the pleas of the victim's family, 55-year-old Marcellus Williams was put to death by lethal injection at approximately 6 p.m. His final words, which were written down just prior, were, "All praise be to Allah in every situation." I'm not gonna lie, this was a difficult one for me. I wish I could say I can't believe it. I wish I could say, oh my God, it's so shocking. Like, I just can't believe. Sadly, I can't believe. I think with this one, I don't think I was surprised. Like I said, I've been black my whole life, so not much surprises me. The word is not surprising. The word is just disgusted, I guess. I guess I'm just disgusted. Although a point comes where you're no longer surprised by the things, I don't know that you ever stop being disgusted. I feel like that's where I am. Like, that's the proper words. Let me know your thoughts down below. Like the video before you leave. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not. As always, I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one, which will be Thursday. Child, Thursday's video was definitely a mess. Peace. This case did lead me to another one I'm gonna talk about next Tuesday. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you the case of Jennifer Cheffley, another someone who is also behind bars. I'm not finished researching, so I'm not gonna give any of my thoughts yet. I like to make very informed opinions, and so we're gonna break her case down next week, and y'all be safe. Who was in there for a Henry and Marcellus share the serial match. No, not the serial matches. Still, with these inconsistencies, they continue to focus. Okay. They searched the inoperable girl. I feel like the last part of the word got stuck in my mouth. It got stuck. My brain thought it came out. Okay. But not in the case of Deborah McClain. But not in the case of Deborah. I keep saying Deborah. Why? As far as there being similarities okay, no. What? Not the ice cream truck, girl. Slow down. Here I go. You can't say that it is an exact match to the Eric Greitens to stop the execution and have a board of five former Georges. Oh my God. 5 former judges. Andrew Bailey asked the Supreme